The camera opens on a dimly lit room. A single lamp flickers, its light carving soft shadows across a cluttered desk. Books stacked like ruins. A cold cup of tea and a notebook filled with restless handwriting. Outside, rain whispers against the window pane. The man sitting there, silent, unblinking, stares not at the world but through it. His eyes are fixed on something beyond reason, a thought that refuses to die. The clock ticks louder. Each second feels heavier. Inside his mind, entire universes bloom and collapse in silence. He is not bored. He is burdened. To think deeply is to see too much, the beauty, the rot, the tragedy of being conscious. And yet he cannot stop. Because for some souls, thought is not a habit. It's a heartbeat. The rain hasn't stopped for 3 days. It runs like veins down the glass, drawing trembling rivers across the window. Inside, the air hums faintly, a mixture of paper, candle wax, and solitude. A man sits at his desk, still as stone. He has not spoken in hours, perhaps days. His pen rests in his hand like a relic from another world. He watches the world move in miniature, a raindrop sliding down, colliding with another, merging, falling. Something about it feels familiar. The merging, the collapse, the inevitability of descent. This is how awareness begins, not as enlightenment but as intrusion. A sudden tearing of the veil between comfort and truth. The deep thinker is not born but awakened, often unwillingly. It starts small, a question that refuses to fade, a contradiction that gnaws at sleep, a whisper that says, something is wrong with the way everyone lives. For most, thought is a tool. For a few, it becomes an ocean, and once they fall in, there is no shore to swim back to. He writes in his journal, "It feels like my eyes are open wider than they should be, as if I can see the machinery beneath everything." Every laugh carries the echo of its ending. Every joy trembles with the shadow of decay. He closes the book and sighs. The room answers with silence. Philosophers have called this burden consciousness without anesthesia. The realization that life's surface, the chatter, the errands, the comforts, is only a thin crust over something infinitely deep. The thinker cannot look away. He dissects meaning like a surgeon. He asks why we chase happiness when it dissolves like smoke, why love feels eternal yet fades in time, why we fear death yet live as if immortal. To think deeply is to strip illusions bare, and the more he understands, the less he belongs. He walks through the city at dusk, the lights flickering in puddles, people laughing at cafes, faces glowing blue from their phones. Everyone seems content in their momentum. They are carried by it, soothed by it, but he feels the weight of it all. He sees the loneliness hiding behind smiles, the exhaustion in the laughter, the quiet desperation behind ambition. He hears the hum of 1,000 inner lives, all pretending not to feel lost, and he wonders, is awareness a gift or a wound? The question haunts him. It haunts all deep thinkers, because awareness brings clarity, but clarity brings sorrow. To see the truth is to watch the masks fall, including your own. In his solitude, he remembers a line by Friedrich Nietzsche. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. But what if the monster is not outside, but within, the endless voice that will not let the mind rest? Every deep thinker battles that voice, the one that whispers of futility, of the absurd, of impermanence. And yet, despite the weight, they cannot turn it off. Thought to them is not choice. It is instinct. He stands by the window again. The city glows faintly beneath the storm. His reflection stares back, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, the faint trace of ink on his fingers. He whispers, "I wish I could just not think for a while." But he knows he won't, because for the deep thinker, the mind is both sanctuary and prison. And somewhere between those walls, between clarity and chaos, begins the slow unfolding of self-awareness that changes everything. The rain continues. The candle burns low, and in the stillness of his room, the burden of awareness deepens into something eternal. The rain is quieted, but the world still hums with a kind of exhausted silence. Outside, a dog barks in the distance, and the echo of it feels ancient, like a voice calling from another life. The man sits again at his desk. The candle has died, replaced by a faint orange glow from the streetlight filtering through the blinds. Shadows stretch across the walls like thoughts refusing to sleep. He opens his notebook once more. When I was young, he writes, I envied the people who seemed untouched by thought, those who could laugh without asking why laughter exists. But now I see that ignorance isn't innocence, it's armor. He stops. The word armor lingers. It feels heavy with truth because that's what ordinary life gives, armor. The simple distractions, the rituals, the predictable comforts, they keep people from staring too long into the abyss. But deep thinkers, they are born without it. Or maybe they're the ones who tear it off. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said that intellect is like a light in the night. The brighter it burns, the more darkness it reveals around it. And so the thinker becomes a lighthouse in an endless storm, shining but forever surrounded by shadow. He remembers moments when he tried to stop, when he laughed with friends and felt the warmth of belonging, until his mind whispered, they don't truly know you. When he looked at someone he loved and instead of joy felt the terror of impermanence. When he saw beauty and couldn't help but ask why it fades. This is the unseen cost of awareness, the inability to stay blind. He begins to pace the room, his footsteps soft against the old wooden floor. Thought presses against his skull like static. The more he understands, the more questions multiply, each one splitting into another. Like mirrors facing mirrors, he recalls a memory, a conversation years ago with a mentor who once told him, be careful, my boy. If you stare too long into truth, you will find no place to rest your soul. At the time, he thought it was poetic nonsense. Now he knows it was prophecy. He stops by the window again. The rain has cleared. The city below is still wet, every surface gleaming under streetlights. Cars glide by like silent ghosts. Somewhere a church bell tolls the hour. He feels the sound more than he hears it. The deep vibration moves through him like a pulse from the world itself. And in that vibration, he senses the contradiction of life, the simultaneous presence of creation and decay, joy and despair, beginning and end. The deep thinker's burden is not simply to know, it is to feel knowing, to carry the weight of realization in the bones, not just the brain. He imagines all the thinkers who came before him, Socrates waiting for the hemlock, Kierkegaard pacing through Copenhagen's fog, Simone Weil fasting to touch truth through suffering. Each one had seen too deeply. Each one had been devoured by their own clarity. He whispers to the night, is this what it means to be human, to awaken, and in awakening, lose peace? There is no answer, only the faint hiss of wind slipping through the window frame. He writes again, slowly this time, as though confessing to something divine. Maybe thinking deeply is just the mind's way of grieving the illusion it once believed in. He sets the pen down. The ink still glistens wet on the page. Outside, the clouds part slightly, a thin sliver of moonlight falling across his desk. It catches the corner of his notebook, illuminating the words as if to say, you are not alone in this. He sits there until dawn begins to tint the sky gray-blue. The birds start to wake, their song thin but alive. For a moment he feels the faint echo of calm. The world has begun again, and so too must he, still burdened, still aware, still alive. Because deep down he knows the truth, the burden of awareness is not meant to be escaped. It is meant to be understood, and only through that understanding can the next step of the journey, the isolation it brings, truly begin. The first light of dawn seeps gently through the curtains, pale, uncertain, like a soul hesitating to return to the world. The thinker hasn't slept. His face bears the quiet exhaustion of someone who has wrestled with thoughts too vast for dreams. Outside, the city exhales, footsteps, engines, the murmur of life reawakening. Yet to him it all feels distant, as though he's standing behind a glass wall watching humanity through a fogged mirror. He rises slowly, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. The floor creaks under his bare feet. His eyes land on the notebook still lying open on the desk. The ink has dried, but the words look alive, pulsing with quiet truth. The mind grieves what illusion once comforted. He touches the page with his fingertips, tracing the grooves. In that moment, something shifts, not quite peace but understanding. Awareness, he realizes, is not punishment. It is birth. Painful, yes. Shattering, yes. But within that breaking lies the first breath of authenticity. He steps outside. The air is cold, filled with the scent of wet earth and iron. The rain has left everything glistening, Leaves, rooftops, even the cracks in the pavement. The world seems newly made, as if scrubbed clean by its own sorrow. He walks aimlessly, letting the city move around him. People rush past, briefcases in hand, phones against ears, faces already half lost in tomorrow. He observes them not with judgment but tenderness. He envies them less now. They too are surviving in their own way, unaware perhaps, but still human. A memory surfaces, his father's voice low and certain. "You think too much, son." The world doesn't reward that. He smiles faintly. Maybe his father was right. The world doesn't reward deep thought. It tolerates it at best, fears it at worst. Yet without thinkers, without those who dare to feel the full gravity of existence, the world would drift endlessly in numbness. He stops near a small park. The grass is damp and a single bench sits beneath a tree still dripping with rain. He sits. The wind carries faint sounds. Laughter from a distance, the squeak of bicycle wheels, a church bell marking the hour. He closes his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he lets himself simply listen. There's beauty in the ordinary symphony, in the overlapping lives, the chaos, the continuity. For a brief second, he feels it, the pulse of everything, the delicate thread connecting every consciousness to another. Maybe this unbearable awareness is not a curse, but a kind of compassion. To think deeply is to feel deeply, to hurt deeply, to love deeply. He opens his eyes and watches a child chase a pigeon across the path. The bird flutters upward, scattering droplets of rainlight. The child laughs, and for the first time in what feels like years, he smiles, not out of politeness but from the ache of recognition. That laugh is fleeting. The moment will die. The child will grow. Everything changes, but it all matters. He whispers softly, as if confessing to the wind. Awareness doesn't destroy meaning. It refines it. He sits in silence, and time folds around him. The sun breaks through clouds, and for a moment, the entire park glows, wet leaves turning gold, raindrops blazing like sparks. And in that fragile light, he finally understands. To carry awareness is to carry both the pain of knowing and the privilege of truly seeing. He will always be restless. His thoughts will always run deeper than peace allows. But he will also see beauty where others see nothing, truth where others see comfort. The burden remains, but now it is lighter. Because it is not his enemy, it is his inheritance. He picks up his notebook again that evening and writes, "The mind that suffers from its own awareness also holds the power to awaken others. Every thought is a torch, and yes, it burns the hand that carries it, but it also lights the path for those still walking blind." He closes the book gently. The room grows quiet once more, the same silence as before now, but this time it feels different. Not empty, but sacred. As night approaches, he stands by the window. The city hums below him, alive and unaware, and for once he doesn't resent it. He watches the streetlights flicker on, one by one, like neurons firing across a vast, sleeping mind. The thinker smiles faintly. The burden of awareness will never fade, but perhaps it was never meant to. Perhaps it is the price of being awake in a dreaming world. The candlelight trembles. The notebook rests, and as the camera pulls away from the window, his silhouette remains. One quiet figure against the endless dark, illuminated not by peace, but by understanding, fade to black. The cafe hums with quiet chatter. Cups clink, laughter drifts, and the sound of a coffee grinder cuts through the air like static. He sits at the corner table, notebook open, pen unmoving. Around him, the world appears soft, blurred. People leaning toward each other, their words light and fluid. He observes them like a foreigner in a strange land. There was a time when he would have joined them, when conversation was easy, when silence between words didn't ache. But the more his mind expanded, the smaller the world around him seemed to become. This is the paradox of thought. The deeper one sees, the fewer share the view. He stirs his coffee, watching the ripples spiral outward. Each circle widens, weakens, disappears in a perfect metaphor for connection. Someone once told him, "You think too much for people to be comfortable around you." He had laughed, but the truth of it was sharp. The world does not fear intelligence. It fears introspection. It fears the one who holds up a mirror and asks, "Why are we pretending?" He closes the notebook and glances out the window. Outside, the crowd moves in rhythm. purposeful, unthinking. Faces glow under phone screens, eyes fixed ahead. They seem united yet alone. He whispers under his breath. Maybe isolation isn't chosen. Maybe it's the price of sight. Philosophers across centuries have known this exile. Nietzsche wandering alpine trails alone. Kafka writing to ghosts, Emily Dickinson sending her soul through letters no one read. They did not hate the world. They simply lived in a frequency too subtle for the crowd to hear. The deeper the mind, the quieter the world becomes. He leaves the cafe, stepping into the brittle cold of evening. The city lights are soft and trembling in puddles. He walks without direction, thinking of the strange irony of modern loneliness. Millions of people connected by machines, yet terrified of silence. He remembers a woman he once loved. She had told him, "You're here, but you're somewhere else too. Like part of you is watching life instead of living it." She was right. Deep thinkers often stand halfway between presence and observation, one foot in the world, the other in eternity. It is not arrogance that separates them. It is perception. They see the layers others ignore, the weight behind a word, the unsaid within a smile. Every moment carries meaning, and meaning demands solitude. He turns down a quieter street. A bookstore window glows faintly, its display lined with forgotten poets and dust-covered philosophers. He pauses. Inside, the air smells of paper and time. The old man behind the counter looks up and nods, as if recognizing a kindred ghost. He wanders between the aisles, running his hand along spines. Sartre, Woolf, Camus. Lives lived entirely in the space between thought and silence. He opens a book and finds a line underlined by another reader long gone. Loneliness is the tax we pay to be conscious. Alain de Botton. He closes the book slowly, his reflection caught in the glass of the display case. Faint, divided, almost transparent. That is how deep thinkers move through the world, half present, half absent, carrying their minds like a weight no one else can lift. They long to speak, yet find no language that fits. They crave understanding, yet fear being misunderstood more than being alone. And so they retreat, not out of pride, but necessity. They build worlds inside their heads where depth is not mocked, where silence is not awkward, where meaning can breathe. But even in those inner sanctuaries, a quiet ache remains, the ache of being unseen. He steps back into the night. The city murmurs, indifferent. The sky, vast and black, seems to whisper, "You are not alone in your aloneness." The night deepens. The streets thin, neon lights hum against puddles, bleeding color into the dark. He walks aimlessly, hands in pockets, a figure adrift in the machinery of the city. Everywhere he looks, he sees performance, conversations rehearsed, gestures copied, laughter timed. The world feels scripted, looping endlessly through the same small comforts, and yet he walks outside it, watching with eyes that no longer blink easily. There is a loneliness that comes from being unheard, but a greater one from being untranslatable. He stops near a bridge. Below him the river moves, and dark and patient. Its current murmurs like an old philosopher speaking in riddles. The water doesn't resist its solitude. It becomes it. He leans against the railing and breathes the cold air. His thoughts drift toward all those who had drowned, not in rivers, but in their own minds. Thinkers whose brilliance turned inward and consumed them. He recalls Nietzsche again, the man who tried to wrestle truth itself and broke under its weight. He remembers Kafka, who said, "I am a cage in search of a bird." To think deeply is to stand perpetually between revelation and ruin. The isolation of intellect is not simple loneliness. It's the realization that most people live behind walls of assumption, habit, and inherited belief. The deep thinker by nature tears those walls down, only to find himself exposed, cold, and alone on the open plain of awareness. It's not that he despises company. It's that ordinary conversation often feels like whispering into a wind that carries every word away. He once tried to explain his thoughts to a friend. They had been sitting in a park, sunlight through trees, a warm afternoon. He spoke of the tension between logic and love, between the need for meaning and the emptiness of the universe. His friend had smiled and said lightly, "You think too hard, man. You've got to let things go." The words stung more than intended, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed the chasm between them. He wanted to say, "I can't let things go. They live inside me." But he didn't. He only nodded, smiled back, and changed the subject. That's how most deep thinkers survive. By pretending. Pretending to belong in shallow waters while drowning in unseen depth. He continues walking. The wind has picked up, pushing cold against his face. Somewhere nearby, a street musician plays a violin, a low, haunting melody that trembles with longing. He stops to listen. The notes rise and fall, fragile yet fierce, and for a fleeting moment he feels understood. Not by words, but by tone, the universal language of those who have felt too much. The melody fades into silence, leaving behind a kind of sacred ache. He whispers to himself, maybe isolation isn't punishment, maybe it's preparation, because in solitude the mind sharpens, the noise of the world fades, and what remains is raw consciousness, unfiltered, unadorned. It is in these quiet hours that the thinker truly meets himself. He remembers reading about Blaise Pascal, who wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And yet here he is, walking through the city at midnight, proof that few can bear the full gravity of their own thoughts. Still, something within him shifts, a slow acceptance. Perhaps solitude isn't emptiness but space, the wide, untouched field where new understanding takes root. He stops at a lamppost and writes in his notebook, the ink trembling with each gust of wind. The world values noise, but meaning only grows in silence. He closes the notebook and looks up. The city lights shimmer through fog like constellations fallen to earth. For the first time that night, the vastness doesn't frighten him. It humbles him. He realizes that to think deeply is not to escape humanity, but to see it from a height that demands compassion. Isolation is not rejection. It is refinement. The river murmurs below. The violin fades in memory, and somewhere in the distance, dawn begins its slow silver crawl across the sky. The horizon softens into pale silver. Mist curls low over the streets, carrying the scent of whetstone and exhaust. The world begins to stir again. Footsteps, engines, hurried voices. He watches them from a bench beneath an old tree, its bark glistening from dew. He hasn't spoken to anyone since yesterday, and yet he feels a strange peace in the quiet, as though the silence has accepted him, adopted him. He opens his notebook once more. On its last filled page, the words gleam faintly in the early light. The world values noise, but meaning only grows in silence. He touches the ink gently, as if it were a wound he's learning to live with. Isolation has become his companion. Not cruel, not kind, simply honest. It asks nothing but truth, and in return it offers clarity. He writes again, solitude reveals the architecture of the mind. It strips away the walls others built for us until only the self remains. Raw and vast, he pauses, then closes his eyes. Behind his eyelids, memories flicker, rooms filled with laughter he couldn't join, conversations he drifted through like a ghost, moments when the world moved on without him. At first, those memories sting. But then he sees something else within them, growth. The widening of perception, the depth carved by distance. Maybe solitude is the forge of the soul. He stands stretching and begins to walk toward the rising sun. The streets are wet and shining, mirrors laid flat against the world. The city wakes in fragments, a vendor lifting shutters, a child tugging at her mother's hand, a cyclist gliding through mist. He feels both part of it and apart from it. The eternal duality of the thinker. To belong is to lose a certain freedom. To think deeply is to step beyond the comfort of belonging. The price of vision is distance. And yet, that distance holds its own quiet grace. He remembers reading a letter by Virginia Woolf written before she vanished into the river. I feel certain that I am going mad again. I can't go on spoiling your life any longer. I owe all the happiness of my life to you. Even in her despair there was beauty. The beauty of one who had seen too much and felt too deeply. For some, the weight of awareness becomes unbearable. For others, it becomes art. The thinker stops at the edge of a bridge. The same river flows beneath, gray and shimmering in the new light. He leans against the rail and watches as the current carries away fragments, a leaf, A feather, the reflection of clouds, he whispers. We are all carried by something larger than we understand. In that single breath, his isolation feels softer. He realizes that even in solitude, he is not separate from existence. He is existence, experiencing itself through one fragile consciousness. The loneliness of intellect begins to dissolve, replaced by reverence. He opens his notebook one last time and writes, I am not alone. I am merely standing where few dare to stand, on the edge of silence, listening to the heartbeat beneath thought. He looks out across the city. The first rays of sunlight spill between the buildings, turning glass to gold. People pass by him without noticing, absorbed in their small orbits. But that's all right. He no longer needs to be seen. To be unseen is to be free. He exhales long and steady. The wind carries it across the water. In this quiet, he feels something awaken, a stillness that does not crave validation. The deep thinker does not reject the world. He simply walks beside it in another rhythm. Isolation, he realizes, is not exile. It's a bridge, one that leads from illusion to understanding. And as the camera pulls back, the image widens. The lone figure on the bridge, notebook in hand, framed by a city awakening to light. A faint smile crosses his face, not of joy but of acceptance, because in his silence he has found what most never will, that to walk alone is not to be lost. It is to travel inward, toward the only truth that endures. Fade to black. The rain has returned, soft, rhythmic, relentless. It taps against the window like a heartbeat, steady but uneven, mirroring the storm beneath his ribs. He sits again at his desk, the familiar notebook before him. But tonight the silence feels heavier. Thought and feeling wrestle within him like two ancient forces refusing to share the same body. The intellect whispers, observe, understand, control. The heart trembles and replies, feel, risk, break. It is not a conversation, and it is a war. For deep thinkers, this battle is endless. The mind hungers for logic, the heart aches for meaning. One dissects while the other bleeds. Together they create the exquisite torment of awareness. He remembers a moment of love, years ago, sunlight spilling through her hair, laughter echoing against the walls of a small apartment. He remembers what it felt like to believe in permanence, but the thinker in him ruined it. He questioned it, analyzed it, deconstructed its purity until all that was left was a skeleton of doubt. He writes in his notebook, my mind wants to understand love. My heart only wants to feel it. Between them lies the ruin of both. The rain grows louder. The candle beside him flickers, its flame leaning like a body in exhaustion. He stares at it and thinks, perhaps the mind is like that flame, brilliant, alive, but consuming everything it touches. It illuminates, yes, but it also burns the very world it seeks to see clearly. This is the paradox of deep thought, the desire to understand life so completely that one forgets to live it. He recalls Pascal's words, the heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of. How many philosophers tried to balance that equation? How many failed? He closes his eyes and memories flood in, the warmth of connection, the tenderness of touch, the quiet hum of another breathing beside him. Yet even there the intellect intruded. He would lie awake and think, what is love? Is it chemical? Conditional? Temporary? And in questioning it, he had slowly dismantled the very thing he longed to keep. He opens his eyes. The candle has burned lower. Its light now dances on the edge of shadow. He whispers into the empty room, why must the mind dissect what the soul already understands? The question has no answer, only echo. He remembers reading about Carl Jung's idea of the two halves of life, the first driven by desire and ambition, the second by introspection and truth. The deep thinker lives both halves at once, feeling and analyzing, loving and questioning, building and destroying. This duality makes them brilliant and broken. Emotion without intellect is chaos. Intellect without emotion is emptiness. He writes again, there is a kind of madness in clarity, a cruelty that comes with knowing the anatomy of your own feelings. He stands, restless. The air feels too tight. He opens the window, and the rain scent rushes in, wet pavement, cold air. The faint electricity of the storm. It hits him like baptism, cleansing and cruel at once. He whispers to the wind, "I envy those who can love without thinking." But even as he says it, he knows that envy is hollow. The deep thinker's curse is also his gift. To see love not just as comfort, but as revelation. To feel sorrow not just as pain, but as understanding. For in that inner war between heart and mind lies something sacred, a kind of human truth that cannot be learned through ease. He leans on the windowsill, watching droplets race down the glass, each one catching the light like a brief spark of life before vanishing. Perhaps that is what emotion is, fleeting, luminous, and doomed. And what intellect does is hold the memory of that light long after it's gone. The storm deepens outside. Inside, so does he. The battle rages quietly, unseen but unending. The rain has quieted now. The room is heavy with that strange silence that follows a storm, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. He sits once more, notebook closed, eyes distant. In the stillness, thoughts no longer arrive like word, they arrive like waves. They crash, recede, and crash again. Somewhere deep inside, he senses it, that invisible thread connecting his heart and mind. It is frayed, but it is not broken. He wonders if all deep thinkers walk this same narrow bridge, between reason and feeling, between the ache of knowing and the bliss of ignorance. Perhaps every great soul in history has fought this invisible civil war. He thinks of Nietzsche, who wrote of becoming who one truly is, but also drowned in his own mind's fire. He thinks of Van Gogh, whose emotions burned so bright they turned night skies into suns, yet left him in unbearable loneliness. He thinks of himself, small in comparison, yet carrying the same quiet war within his chest. He whispers, "Maybe genius is not brilliance. Maybe it's just surviving the noise inside one's head." The mind can calculate every possibility, every reason to walk away, every danger of feeling too deeply. But emotion doesn't care. It arrives uninvited, like a tide breaking through the walls of logic. And yet the act of seeing itself carries power. It shapes thought. It guides conscience. It allows one to navigate the hidden currents that govern human life. He leans against the railing, watching the water shift with tides both visible and unseen. He knows he will carry this vision always. It is both armor and burden, because those who see beyond cannot unsee. He walks inland now, leaving the pier behind. The streets are empty, wet from early morning drizzle. The air smells of asphalt and damp leaves, and the city seems to breathe slowly, tentatively, as if awakening only for him to observe. The deep thinker's vision manifests in subtle ways. A glance at a passing couple reveals the tension in their shoulders, the unspoken arguments folded between words. A shopkeeper's hands reveal exhaustion beyond his expression. Even the pigeons in the square, their flight patterns seem almost deliberate, a chaotic order he perceives instinctively. It is a solitude born of comprehension. Most live in shallow streams, unaware of the hidden rivers running beneath them. He cannot. His mind scans, records, interprets, always searching for the invisible threads tying together cause and consequence. He recalls a moment from his youth. Walking through a crowded train station, he had noticed a man lingering at a platform edge, shifting his weight anxiously. Others passed him without a second glance. He saw the fear, the hesitation, the potential for tragedy. He approached just in time to prevent a fatal misstep. The memory leaves a bitter aftertaste. The world does not recognize such perception. Most would dismiss him as overthinking, paranoid, or intrusive. But he knows the truth. The cost of seeing is often loneliness, because those who perceive patterns beyond the ordinary are strangers in familiar lands. Their empathy, insight, and foresight are invisible currencies in a world content with surface appearances. He stops at a small bridge spanning a narrow canal. The water reflects the gray sky, broken by ripples from falling leaves. He leans over the railing and watches the motion, and as he does, he begins to understand the rhythm of life in miniature. Tension, release, collision, retreat. A microcosm of existence itself, he writes in his notebook. Seeing what others cannot is not an act of superiority. It is a constant negotiation with reality. To witness, to understand, is a responsibility the world rarely acknowledges, and one the mind cannot escape. He closes the notebook and breathes. The knowledge weighs, but it also steadies him, for in vision lies clarity. The mind that perceives deeply is not easily deceived. It recognizes falsehood in speech, illusion in appearances, danger in subtleties. Yet clarity comes with sorrow. The world continues its cycles, blind, unknowing, unheeding. The thinker can warn, advise, even act, but he cannot carry all the weight of awareness for others. Outside, a child drops a stone into the canal. The ripples spread, overlapping, colliding, fading. Each one is insignificant, yet each matters. The analogy is immediate. The thinker understands that even small actions can have profound, unseen consequences, and so he watches carefully, lives cautiously, and interprets endlessly. This is the solitude of insight, the knowledge that the world is deeper than most realize, and that the privilege of seeing comes with responsibility few can bear. He rises from the bridge. The city begins to hum, a low, steady heartbeat beneath rooftops, streets, and alleyways. He feels connected to it and apart from it simultaneously. To see what others cannot is to live in parallel. 1 foot in ordinary life, 1 foot in the hidden machinery of existence. It is a gift, but it is a lonely one. Night falls. The city is muted, cloaked in mist and dim amber light from street lamps. The air smells faintly of smoke and rain, carrying the subtle hum of lives unfolding unseen. He walks alone, notebook tucked under his arm, eyes scanning. Patterns emerge everywhere. A door slightly ajar, a shadow that moves unnaturally, a smile that hides tension. He sees the hidden threads binding moments, choices, and people together, like an invisible tapestry stitched beneath everyday life. To the casual observer, these details are invisible, meaningless. But to him they form the architecture of truth. He pauses on a hill overlooking the city. Lights shimmer on wet streets and car engines murmur like distant wails. The world appears peaceful, normal, beautiful, yet he knows the undercurrent. He feels it. A quiet anxiety, tension, joy, sorrow, all overlapping in waves he can sense but not fully explain. Seeing what others cannot is not merely perception. It is empathy magnified, awareness amplified. It is the ability to witness the invisible without being consumed by it, though he often feels the pull of the unseen, like tides tugging at his mind. A memory surfaces, a friend, long ago, asking, "Why do you notice everything? Why can't you just enjoy it?" He had no answer then. Now he whispers to the night, "To see fully is to love and to suffer. To ignore is to exist comfortably. I cannot unsee, for the world will always reveal itself whether I want it to or not." The wind carries the scent of rain and possibility. Somewhere a church bell tolls, slow, deliberate. The sound resonates in his chest, echoing through the spaces between mind and heart. He sits on a bench, watching a lone figure cross a street. To the world it is a simple act. To him it is a story unfolding, hesitation, decision, the weight of consequence. He imagines the ripple effects and a word spoken, a choice made, a life altered. Each detail matters, and yet he cannot intervene in every narrative. He opens his notebook one last time and writes, "To see beyond is both blessing and burden. One witnesses the hidden currents of life, the fragile architecture of human existence, and the subtle truths that most will never notice. And yet in this awareness there is purpose, to navigate, to understand, to bear witness. The city sleeps. Rain glistens on asphalt. A cat darts into the shadows. Light spills from a window, illuminating the notebook briefly. A small island of clarity in the vast, unknowable night. He closes the book. For a moment the world seems still, but he knows it is not. Life continues, layered and hidden, rich with details beyond perception. The deep thinker rises and walks slowly through the mist. Every footstep echoes softly, as if marking the passage of one who sees what others cannot. He smiles faintly, not in triumph, but in quiet acceptance. To witness, to understand, to see beyond, it is a path few can walk, and yet it is his, because those who see the hidden threads of existence also carry its weight. They are burdened, yes, but alive in a way others rarely know. The moon breaks through clouds, casting silver across his path. The wind lifts slightly, whispering secrets only he can hear, and in that moment he knows. Seeing beyond is not a choice. It is destiny. The camera pulls back, revealing the lone figure walking into the city's fog, a small flame of awareness moving through the vast, uncomprehending night. Fade to black. The first light of morning filters through a thin layer of mist. It falls softly on cobblestone streets, wet from overnight rain, carrying a scent of earth and renewal. He walks slowly, notebook tucked under his arm, the city around him quiet but vibrating with unspoken stories. The paradox of enlightenment is never obvious. It is not revealed in grand epiphanies or heroic acts. It is subtle, a quiet recognition that seeing truth changes everything yet leaves the world unchanged. He pauses on a corner. The street is empty except for a stray dog sniffing the puddles. To anyone else this is mundane. To him it is a microcosm. Instinct, survival, caution, curiosity, all intertwined. Deep thinking has taught him to see layers. Life is never what it appears to be. Each gesture, each expression, each sound carries hidden currents. Most people live in the shallow surface, unaware of the invisible tide beneath. He inhales slowly, feeling the paradox pressing against his ribs. The mind can know so much, yet it cannot change all it sees. Awareness illuminates, but it also isolates. The thinker lives in truth, yet that truth is often invisible to others. He stops at a fountain, watching the water swirl. Light glints off each ripple, creating miniature constellations that appear and vanish in a heartbeat. He thinks of the human mind in this way, constantly moving, reflecting, altering the light, yet fleeting and fragile. The paradox of enlightenment, he realizes, is this: the more one sees, the more one perceives the futility of influence. Insight grants clarity but does not grant control. Awareness awakens compassion yet carries sorrow. He sits on the fountain's edge, notebook open. The pen hovers over the page, trembling slightly. He writes, "To see the world as it truly is both gift and torment. The invisible becomes visible, the subtle becomes overwhelming. We carry truths others cannot bear to know, and yet we cannot remain untouched by them." A bird lands nearby, shaking water from its wings. Its eyes are sharp, unyielding. The thinker watches it and feels kinship. Both are observers, witnesses to patterns, movements, and possibilities unseen by the untrained eye. He recalls a conversation with an old mentor. Knowledge is a bridge, but every bridge crosses chasms you cannot fill. And he understands now that the chasms are not to be filled. They exist to mark the limits of influence, the boundaries of perception. Enlightenment does not remove the world's mysteries. It exposes the tension between what is known and what remains hidden. The wind rises, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant fires. The city begins to stir, voices, footsteps, doors opening. He watches without participating, a quiet figure in a moving tapestry. Living with the unseen is a discipline of endurance. Every day the thinker balances between immersion and detachment. He feels the world's joys and sorrows, yet cannot carry all of them. Insight requires perspective. Empathy requires boundaries. He walks along the riverside now, the water moving silently beside him, dark and patient. It reflects the city's rising lights, the sky pale with dawn, the glimmer of truth and illusion intertwined. Every ripple tells a story, one most people never notice. The deep thinker is burdened and blessed by these stories. He perceives the unseen motives behind smiles, the invisible threads that tie strangers together, the silent suffering that no one acknowledges. This vision is a gift, and yet it exacts its toll. He pauses on a stone bridge. The cold seeps through his coat, but he hardly notices. His mind drifts to the countless instances when knowledge was both illumination and pain. Seeing injustice in a small gesture, despair behind a laugh, hope flickering faintly but overlooked, these are the moments that weigh heaviest. Enlightenment is paradoxical because it never grants peace. Instead, it intensifies perception. Every joy is tinged with melancholy. Every act of beauty shadows loss. To live fully aware is to carry the world quietly, invisibly, inside oneself. He remembers a philosopher writing by candlelight centuries ago, contemplating the unspoken suffering of humanity. That same candle burned in his own mind, flickering, warm yet fragile, and yet there is purpose. To see, to understand, to bear witness, this is the subtle labor of insight. The enlightened do not command the world, but they navigate its hidden currents, aware of the subtle architecture beneath life's surface. He sits on the bridge's edge, feet dangling above the water. The city hums around him, oblivious. He writes again in his notebook, "To witness is not to change everything. It is to remain awake in a sleeping world. To know what others cannot see is a kind of solitude, but it is also a kind of freedom." The wind lifts, carrying faint echoes of voices from the streets below. He listens without needing to respond. Every sound, every gesture, every fleeting glance is a note in the unseen symphony of existence. Living with the unseen requires discipline. It demands that one experience without drowning, observe without intervening at every turn, and understand without being consumed, and yet he finds moments of quiet beauty. A child laughing alone on a corner, a couple walking hand in hand, their rhythm synchronized by instinct, a cat leaping gracefully from wall to wall. These glimpses are fleeting, but they are proof that awareness does not only reveal burden, it reveals connection. The paradox crystallizes. Enlightenment is both weight and gift, both sorrow and awe. Those who see what others cannot must navigate their world carefully, but in doing so they exist with a depth inaccessible to most. Night falls again, quiet and unassuming. The city hums softly, distant conversations and passing cars blending into a low, continuous murmur. He walks alone through narrow streets glistening from rain, the light from street lamps reflecting like faint constellations in puddles. He stops at a small plaza, empty except for a fountain trickling steadily. The water catches the light in fractals and he feels the world opening, layers upon layers of reality, hidden yet undeniable. To most it is ordinary. To him it is alive. The paradox of enlightenment weighs upon him. Knowledge has granted clarity, but it has also shown the impossibility of absolute change. The truths he perceives, the subtle motives, the quiet sufferings, the invisible interconnections, are both beautiful and devastating. He is awake in a world that sleeps. He kneels and dips his hand in the fountain. The water is cold and pure, a reminder that even in isolation life flows and continues. He imagines all the moments unnoticed, the acts of courage and love and sorrow that pass unseen, yet exist nonetheless. Awareness is a double-edged gift. It allows him to see the threads that bind humanity, yet isolates him from those who cannot or will not perceive them. The enlightened live with invisible burdens, the weight of comprehension, the ache of unshared truths. He writes in his notebook one last time, "Enlightenment is living between two worlds, one seen by all, one only perceived by few. To carry knowledge is to carry solitude. To witness truth is to live in a state of quiet vigilance. And yet in this vigilance lies freedom. The freedom to navigate the world unbound by illusion." The wind stirs, whispering faintly as if affirming his words. Somewhere a church bell tolls, marking the passage of time in a rhythm he both observes and inhabits. He stands, taking a slow breath, letting the weight of comprehension settle around him like a cloak, heavy yet protective. The city stretches beyond him, vibrant, chaotic, ignorant, and yet perfect in its imperfection. He realizes that enlightenment does not isolate in the way he once feared. It isolates in order to preserve vision, to allow insight to breathe. The deep thinker lives among others, but within a realm few can enter. To live in the unseen is to exist with patience, compassion, and awareness. The plaza grows darker, but he does not feel fear. He senses rhythm in the night, the quiet heartbeat of a world moving unseen currents alive beyond ordinary perception. The thinker begins walking again. Every step is deliberate, conscious, resonating with the knowledge that the world is vast, infinite, and layered beyond comprehension. Each detail, each shadow, each fleeting moment matters, whether acknowledged or not. And as he moves through the city, the camera pulls back, revealing the lone figure walking beneath the pale light of street lamps, a witness to the hidden architecture of existence. He smiles faintly, not for triumph but for understanding. Enlightenment is not escape. It is presence in full measure, seeing, feeling, and living with the unseen. The rain begins again, soft, insistent, like a quiet applause. He lifts his face, lets it wash over him. The droplets are neither burden nor relief. They are simply acknowledgement, proof that he exists within this paradox, awake, aware, alone, yet profoundly alive. The screen fades to black, leaving only the faint echo of the unseen world he inhabits. The city sleeps, but the world does not. Beneath the hum of streets and the flicker of distant lights, currents move unseen, thoughts, desires, fears, hopes, intertwining in patterns only a few can perceive. He stands on a rooftop, wind tugging at his coat, the night sky stretching infinitely above him. Stars scatter like fragments of thought, each one a glimmer of possibility, a spark of hidden truth. He breathes slowly, feeling the weight of consciousness settle into his chest. To think deeply is to live in tension between what is felt and what is known, what is visible and what is unseen. Every revelation carries the quiet ache of awareness, every insight the burden of solitude. Yet there is beauty in it, the mind that probes, the heart that feels, the eyes that witness, and together they forge a life alive with intensity, vivid in color and shadow alike. He closes his eyes and listens, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant bell of a church, the soft pulse of a world moving beyond comprehension. It is a symphony composed in silence, a narrative written in whispers, a truth carried in the spaces most ignore. For the deep thinker, life is never ordinary. Every glance, every sound, every fleeting moment is imbued with meaning. And though the world may never notice, the truth endures, uninfinite, unyielding. Alive, he steps back from the edge, letting the wind carry him forward, and the camera pans upward, revealing the city in its entirety, vast, unknowable, magnificent. Somewhere in that immensity, he moves quietly, unseen, aware, awake. And in the quiet of his solitude, he smiles, not for triumph, not for resolution, but for understanding, because to think deeply is to live fully, even in the shadows of a world that will never truly see. Fade to black.